Hello, I'm Gloria Greer. You know, sometimes you find hidden treasures where you least expect to find them. I am at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Palm Springs, California, known for its combat aircraft. But there are so many hidden treasures here. So come with us as we explore the arts. I'm in the Palm Springs Air Museum library with Major General Ken Miles, two-star general. Ken, what attracted you here in the first place?
Well, I've been a lifelong flyer.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to me like when we moved to the Valley, the Palm Springs Air Museum was the right venue for me. And it just was a lovely place to come and kind of reminisce a little bit about my past career. And then also think about what the Air Museum is all about. And basically, our mission is to preserve, to honor, and to educate. So we're preserving our history. We're trying to honor all of our veterans and our men who served, both not only airmen, but also all veterans, both land and sea, and also then to educate our youth. But we want to preserve World War II because that was probably the greatest war that we actually was involved in. It really changed our nation more than any other war. And it just meant so much to the nation to actually win a war.
But we also, there is so much art, little planes behind us, but wonderful paintings and statues. What is your favorite? What is there? I consider them art treasures.
We do have art treasures. You know, we have some great artists here. Stan Stokes is one of our foremost artists that's here. But we also have Keith Ferris, who's a great aviation artist. We also have Robert Taylor, a lot of his paintings. Probably my favorite is the Stan Stokes painting of the Battle of Midway, where the SBD dive bombers went in and actually sank the Japanese fleet. And Stan did that from just a great interest in history. He actually interviewed some of the lead pilot on that mission, and that helped him actually paint that painting. The reason it's my favorite, although I love them all, is the fact that I think it's the most overlooked because it's right in the entrance of the museum. People walk in and they don't look up, and you have to look up because it's a huge painting, and it's very well done in the detail in the painting, the clouds, the sea wakes. It's just actually a magnificent piece of art.
Well, we're now in the Craven's hangar of the Palm Springs Air Museum. In fact, there are a group of people here who are watching and looking at all of these wonderful planes. But of course, I am intrigued and thrilled that I have with me Stan Stokes. Now, Stan Stokes is an aeronautic artist, and he's one of the most famous in the world. Behind us is his mural of the Tuskegee Airmen, which, well, you'll have to tell the story, Stan, but I do want to say for our viewers that your work hangs in the Smithsonian Institute, it hangs in the Reagan Library, it hangs in the Bush Library.
And now the Ford Library.
Right.
And the Palm Springs Air Museum.
And the Palm Springs Air Museum, and everyone here is thrilled with your murals. Tell me about this Tuskegee Airmen.
This goes all the way back to about the time the Air Museum was about to open up. Bob Williams, who was a Tuskegee Airman and who wrote the screenplay that became the HBO movie, The Tuskegee Airmen, got me involved with the whole thing. He had been out here, he saw the artwork, he gave me a call, I went into Pasadena. It didn't take long for us to get the whole thing worked up and everything. Then we had to get a whole thing together to fund the thing. Yeah. We did that. I did a small version of it first to make sure it was fine with everybody, and then set forth painting this section by section. We had to do it in sections because as soon as it was done, we were going to take it into LAX.
And it hung there for
we
quite a while.
did that, and it was there for about a year and a half in Terminal 2. And then my assistant, Joe Logeman, and I got to go in and take it down and truck it back out here, and then spent the next month getting it installed permanently on the wall here. So now it's permanently at the Palm Springs Air Museum. It won't be going anywhere else. There's a lot of information on the internet about the Tuskegee Airmen, lots of really good books. But they were great guys. They were the cream of the crop of the young black men at the time. They all had those fighter pilot egos. They all knew they could do it, and they did it. They did a marvelous job. They proved that they were just as good as anybody else at something as complex as fighting or flying a fighter plane.
Yeah, yeah.
And guarding the bombers as they were doing it.
They were escorts.
They were escorts. That was their main job.
Which is really a kind of a frightening thing to be.
Yeah. They were so good at it that eventually the bomber crews, without knowing who they were, started requesting that the Red Tails, the 332nd Fighter Group, escort them, because they stood the best chance of surviving with these guys escorting them. But in doing the mural, I got to know most of these guys that are still alive. Of course, Bob Williams, but then he got a whole group of others together to form the board to get this thing done. And they were wonderful guys.
Now you have photographs, I mean, they're not photographs, you have paintings, amazing portraits of each of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Well, a lot of them. There were actually 996 of them total, and I couldn't do that. I wound up with 51 of them on the mural. And I had things happen, like one of the fellows who had just sent me photos of him, and these are little black and white photos from World War II. I had never met him. I'm painting away one day. I had been painting along for quite a while, so I had quite a bit of the mural done. But he was the first one that I had painted, Rusty Burns, and he's up on the upper left-hand corner there. I'm painting away, and one day I'm aware that somebody is behind me. I'm up on a ladder, and I kind of look down, and here's this guy smiling away at me, and I said, "Can I help you?" He said, "I'm Rusty Burns." So I got down, and we've been really great friends since.
And I must say that you did paint this right here at the Palm Springs Air
With
Museum.
everybody watching, everybody
Right.
going, "Well, what are you going to do next, and why isn't this person in there?" But a lot of people just having a great time watching me paint it.
Yeah.
And that rolled into all these other big things. I did all the big things for the Reagan Library right here, too.
Now, you had a smaller version. I guess you start with a small version.
Whenever I'm doing something big, I do it small so I can make the mistakes small first, not make the mistakes huge, and get it all worked out, the composition, the colors, and everything else. You get everything established that way, looking good small, and then you just graft it up.
But
So,
there's one that
the
now...
6-foot-long one is here at the Air Museum.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is terrific. Okay, now let's talk about the other wonderful paintings, murals. They're like murals, they're on the walls, that you have in the other hangars.
One is of Corsair coming in to land on the carrier Essex. I did that in 1984 in Minnesota when Bob Pond was just at the beginnings of this whole museum. And when he moved everything out here, they actually took that down off the wall. Somebody took a saw to it and cut it in 9 sections to get it onto the truck.
Oh my.
It got out here, they put it on the wall. Everybody was kind of like, "Oh my God, it's ruined." But I spent about a week on a lift up there with the paints and everything and patched it up pretty good.
Well, it's pretty magnificent looking.
Yeah.
Now that is the one that's in the pond hangar.
In the Navy hangar. And the Corsair is usually right there with it, so everybody can look at the Corsair, look at it on the mural.
And what about the one midway that as
The
you
one
walk
over
in?
the entrance that most people miss because they're walking in trying to see where they pay for their ticket and everything, and they go right underneath it. But that is the Battle of Midway. There are some SBD Dauntless dive bombers that were made by Douglas here in Santa Monica.
How did you get into all of this, of doing these wonderful? I mean, you are, look you up on the internet and you are world famous, and
Thank you.
there are one or two others like Robert Taylor, but here you are and you do it with such detail that a person walking into this museum, looking up on the wall, you think you're there.
Well, I had drafting in high school. I think that helped.
Okay.
I also learned how to fly when I was in high school. The first week in college is when I started painting. I had 2 art classes. And after that first week, I went, "I like this." And I've never stopped.
Yeah.
This September, it'll be 40 years.
And aside from the large murals, you have other small paintings throughout. I mean, no matter where you look in this museum, whether you walk in a hall or you go up the stairs, you go to the education center, there are Stan Stokes paintings. Let me ask you about the nose art, because nose art is a very important part of this museum, and apparently was a very important part of the various war combats
very
with
much
planes.
so. Yeah.
And we're going to look at some of it, but tell me about your doing the nose art and also the stories behind nose art.
Well, the nose art finishes off establishing the character of the airplane. World War II, you think of airplanes as having nose art. So to make a World War II airplane look complete as it would have been flying in the war, you need nose art on it. And the nose art happened because you had these thousands of guys going off to all parts of the world, leaving America, leaving American girls behind, and suddenly they were out in the middle of the Pacific, or they were in England. In England, at least they could make a nuisance of themselves with the English girls. But you go to some place out in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific and there's nobody there. And they longed for home, they longed for their girlfriends, whatever. And the nose art was a little bit of a piece of that home, of that longing for a female.
Yeah.
Well, the flying tigers, the tiger,
Yeah.
actually came about. There was some newspaper articles written real early on when they just thought of themselves as the American Volunteer Group.
In
They had been
Burma and China.
but they started getting all these victories right after Pearl Harbor. So they got a lot of great press. And one of the newspapers, the reporter just coined the phrase there, they are flying tigers. The Disney studios read that, and before the guys knew it over in Burma, they opened up these crates that had Disney studios on them, and they had left hand and right hand flying tigers. The tiger like that with the wings
Yeah.
and the whole thing, that came from the Disney studios. Yeah, well, there's a mural in the B-17 hangar. There needed to be one. I was finishing up one of the other big murals, actually the Tuskegee mural at the time. So we kind of got my daughter to do it. I was there every day, so I was able to talk her through it and everything. But she is the one who actually physically painted the thing. And as you go into the B-17 hangar, if you turn around and look up, it's up there. It's pretty big.
We have a special surprise with us. I was so pleased to find Rusty Burns here. And Stan Stokes mentioned you, Rusty, when we were talking about the Tuskegee mural.
Yes.
And there you are in the corner.
Yep.
All right, how did
Big
you
life.
feel? I want to talk about Tuskegee a little bit, but how did you feel when they were doing the mural? What did it
Well,
do for
actually,
you?
it came somewhat as a surprise to me because I was asked to send Stan a photograph
Yeah.
that he was going to do a mural, and I really wasn't involved in the preliminaries of the work. So it kind of came as a surprise to me one day. I came out here and met Stan and saw the mural for the first time, and it was awe-inspiring.
Yeah. Now, you
Really?
were a pilot during
Yes,
World
sir.
War II.
Yes, I was. I
And-
didn't go overseas, but I
Oh.
did finish school, and
Yeah.
I was with the 99 Fighter Squadron when they were attached to the 477th Composite Group.
And how did you feel when you were, they didn't treat you right, really?
I was so happy and so content to be a pilot that I really didn't pay too much attention to the
Isn't that
negativism.
interesting? Yeah.
It did exist, of course, but flying overcame a lot of adversity.
Yeah.
Really, it was such a joy to do, and I didn't spend too much time worrying about things that weren't going right.
And of course, I talked to some of the other Tuskegee Airmen about this some years ago, and that was that still being an American was important to them, despite what they
yeah.
went through.
Yeah.
And
And being able to do what we wanted to do,
Yeah.
being able to fly, not being cut off from flying, being able to fly and going overseas and doing our thing for our country. Why, it was satisfying, very satisfying.
this treasure is known as the Fast Carrier Task Force, and it represents the five components of the task force
Five basic ships, yes.
of World War II. So this is the submarine.
It's a submarine.
We're looking at the back of it
That's
right
right.
now.
And we're seeing a cutaway as to what it looks like down below, so our visitors can get some idea of how men lived aboard these boats. They were referred to as boats. Everything else is referred to as a ship, by the way.
When you say these, you mean all or just the submarine?
Just the submarine. The
Okay.
submariners refer to it as a boat.
Now, there was a couple who made all of these. They were originally from Wisconsin and later
Yes.
moved, I think, to La Quinta for a while. How did they have the detail? Where did they get the detail?
Well, they would use authentic drawings of these ships, and spend a better part of a year just cutting out the parts and deciding how they were going to fabricate it and put it together, and then the better part of a second year to actually assemble and put the ships together. And that's true of each of the ships you're going to see in this collection.
That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, the
And tell me the five. We have the submarine.
submarine, you'll see the destroyer, the cruiser, the aircraft carrier, and the battleship.
I think we should go and look at the aircraft carrier,
All right.
particularly now with the popularity of the PBS show, Carrier. You know, if you watch Carrier on PBS, you'll see what a air carrier looks like today. But this is an air carrier from World War II.
World War II,
And
yeah.
a very famous one.
That's right. This is a model of the USS Lexington, one of the more famous carriers of World War II. It was an Essex class carrier, but the USS Lexington. It was lost at the Battle of Coral Sea, May of 1942.
And this, again, the detail of the couple who made this. It's all welded together and designed
is.
that way. It's incredible. With the little ships here, just every component.
They used a lot of common pieces. These guns, for example, are actually finishing nails. They look just like the real thing, so that's how they got around fabricating some of these things.
All right, now this is really a famous ship because
This is the USS Missouri. Battleship. It was one of the 4 most modern battleships built during World War II, and it was the ship that the surrender documents were signed aboard on September 2nd, 1945 in Tokyo Bay.
and where was the deck where we've seen photographs of them signing?
This is actually the surrender deck right here. It's now known as the surrender deck, and there is a bronze plaque. It's glass in a glass dome that depicts the exact position of the table where the surrender documents were signed. And it's interesting to note from history that MacArthur did not come out to the table to sign the documents until the Japanese were in place. And to get there, they had to climb this little ladder. He made them come to him for the surrender ceremony. It was just part of his showmanship and dedication to detail that was involved in the surrender itself.
This, I think, we would call a work in progress, and it depicts, as I understand it, every airplane that was used during World War II. Is that correct?
That is correct, for every
And-
country.
Yeah, and Mr. McKee here is the project manager of this. So much has been donated here at the Palm Springs Air Museum.
Yes, this was a donation of a local person here who had been building these for several years. They're all built to one scale, 1/72 scale. So when you look at the total collection here, they all relate to each other for their proper size and relationship. And he's done that throughout the whole series of collections, doing Russian, Japanese, Italian, American, German, and everybody who participated.
I understand that the man who donated this and built every one of these planes is a dentist.
That is correct. That's what I
And I
understand.
guess the little delicacy that you need in the mouth is what he needed to make these. I mean, you know, when you come in close on them, there's one plane you showed me that was German, and it looks like tiny wiring right over there.
Right.
Right there.
Yeah.
And that's, you said, is the radar.
That is radar, and you'll see it looks like whiskers on there, and it's
Yeah.
very, very fine and delicate. We started on top with the U.S. Navy, and then to the left of that, we put in a group of specials, which was Australia and other countries that had maybe 2 or 3 planes in the system. To the far right behind me were the Italian collection.
They didn't have very many next to all of these others.
Yeah, not as many,
Yeah.
certainly. And then this tier here has to do with the Army Air Corps. This group over here is more of Army Air Corps. There was a lot of planes in that collection. This is the German platform or tier here, and the Germans also are on this platform. They had a great number of airplanes that covered every type of pursuit, bombing, strafing, dive bombing, everything you can think of. Then we go down to the Japanese, who filled 2 tiers, and they had been fighting, you know, since the early 1930s and had developed an air force of quite some size and versatility.
And you know, one of the planes, and you showed this to me before we were being filmed, is the Constellation, which was actually a civilian plane. But it looks very much like planes were built for the war. So maybe you'll show us that and explain that.
The Constellation is this large 3-tailed 4-engine airplane here, which was really designed as a passenger aircraft, but was easily converted to carry cargo and lots of manpower, you might say, to and from the war and all of its operation areas.
We look at the B-17 in the hangar, and it looks so large. And yet here, while it's larger than the small planes, it doesn't look that large.
No, that is right. That's why I think this is such a unique display, because everything is shown in that 1/72 relationship and gives you a true picture of the scope and size of these aircraft.
I thank you for explaining about this, and I know that our viewers are going to want to come over and see this really unusual art treasure. You know, I love libraries, And libraries are always filled with hidden treasures.
You're in the right place.
And you are the historian,
Yes, I am.
Bob Andretti, and you are a pioneer member. You've been with this museum
ma'am.
ever since it started.
right.
Okay, so you've seen this library grow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and you have a lot of literary works that no one can normally see.
Exactly.
Would you tell me about
Well,
them?
we have, as these books come in,
Yeah.
we have some that are like, we have Richard Byrd. We have his signed book. We have Lindbergh's signed book. And books come from all over the place. People, their grandfather dies, they give us the books, and we find things in there that you cannot believe. We have diaries of people. Of course, I have a collection here, the Flying Tiger collection. That's very rare, and it's just unbelievable the stuff that it wasn't planned this way, but it just kept developing and developing until as you look around, it's just books, and you could not put a price on them.
And magazines. I mean, we're staring at this collection of Life magazines that starts in 1936, and it's every issue, as long
That's
as
right.
that magazine.
We have every issue from 1936 to 1949.
There's a painting over in the corner we're going to look at. It's wonderful, of a gentleman who was in prison, and he did the painting, and while he was in a German prison, and then his book, after he was released,
Right.
he did a book on his paintings.
Right.
But how did he do that? He didn't have paintbrushes or paper or paint?
But he got shot down in a B-26, and he bailed out and became what they call an evadee. He evaded the Germans for quite a while.
Yeah, then they finally caught him. But according to, there's a little information under the painting, and he used human hair to make the paintbrushes, and also the paint, I forget, he took labels from things and was able to get paint somehow from labels
Right.
of cans.
Oh, the things that he did.
And then he traded cigarettes for the paper with the German guards. But and this book is also here in the library, and also can be bought in the store. It's just one of the stories that you find in the library at the Palm Springs Air Museum. And one more thing I want to mention is this photograph above the door.
Okay, that I was just going to mention that. A person came in and said, "I've got this photograph here. Do you know anything about it?" And I took it. I looked. Oh my gosh! I started chills all over. Wow! It's a real photograph. 1914, San Diego, the first Aero Squadron of the United States.
You know what I love? There's so many sculptures here in the museum. Wonderful sculpture above the Flying Cross, the Eagle. And then there's the wonderful sculpture in memory of the various servicemen.
In this book right here, it's showing Bauer. He was a Medal of Honor winner, but, and he was with Joe Foss.
Oh, yes.
He's depicting what they call a deflection shot. You see, normally whenever you shoot down a plane, the Japanese never could do this. They had to get behind a plane, right? But,
Okay.
But Joe Foss developed a way of calling deflection. In other words, if you look at that statue, he starts his turn. Well, he turns with him, and he shoots here. And because when he shoots there, he runs into the bullets. So that's what that statue is depicting.
Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing some of the hidden treasures at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Palm Springs, California. But you haven't seen all of them, so you'll just have to come over and inspect for yourself. I'm Gloria Greer. I hope you'll be with us next time as we continue to explore the arts.